But the reason why archaeology is so broad and why it has practitioners who in many ways have trouble talking to one another because they're doing things so differently, is because it shares a lot with anthropology and history. It is really very closely tied to anthropology and history. More about how that some of Vincent. But increasingly, it's using science methodology. You've got a piece of stone. You want to talk about it. You want to talk about what it can tell you about the past. You'd be daft if you didn't ask the geologist what kind of stone is it. Or you'd be daft if you didn't ask a physicist if he could perhaps date it and tell you how old it is. So we use a lot of science methodology, which in my view does not necessarily make us a science and doesn't make us not history. So in fact archaeology is very broad, yes. We're interested in anything in the past. We're interested in the past of everything. So obviously we're going to get people who are going to find it easy to talk to architects and art historians. But on the other hand, Vincent finds it very easy to talk to chemists and physicists and geologists and geophysicists and so on. And some of us can't do that, because we don't have that language, right? So there's a lot of variety in archaeology, and you'll see it in Vincent's presentation. Some of you will know what these things are. You know what that thing is up there, that gold rhino? It's a gold-plated, it's a rhino made out of gold plate, and it comes from Mapungubwe, which is on the border of Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Botswana, I guess. And it was excavated roughly, very roughly, in other words, not very systematically, not very carefully, quite a long time ago, at a time when what those people were doing was not, strictly speaking, archaeology. I think it was, they were mining the site for gold. They knew that there were some gold objects in there. This is about 100 to 120 years ago, or something like that. And, it wasn't very careful. And it's quite a contentious piece. This is quite a famous diagram that gets reproduced in many ways about the evolution of people. You'll notice that they're all men, well actually they've all got their right leg tastefully placed, so the primary and secondary indications of maleness are not all that visible, but you can probably see from the physiological clues that that's quite interesting to me, because I'm interested in rock paintings, and when I look at rock paintings I can see that there are many ways in which you can tell paintings of women from men, and it's not only about breasts and penises and so on. There are lots of physiological clues. Anyway, it's kind of the evolutionary model of the evolution of people. And a lot of other interesting clues. You see, there are artifacts up here, right? These people have got artifacts. These people don't have artifacts. They're ancestors, but they're more distant ancestors, and presumably they precede the manufacturing of artifacts. Archaeology is really all about artifacts. They're very central to the reconstruction of people that archaeologists make. Artifact, meaning made by skill. In fact, when I was a student of archaeology, man the tool maker was the kind of definition of people, man. There was a gender issue as well, which we will try and avoid now, obviously. But the definition of people as the only artifact-making organism was quite common. Well, we now know that's not true. We know that chimpanzees make artifacts. Make quite a lot of artifacts, make quite a lot of different kinds of artifacts. But they are not super dependent on artifacts. We are dependent on artifacts. You know, if I hadn't had help getting it, I would have been lost here. We are dependent on artifacts. We're sitting in artifacts. We're sitting on artifacts, wearing artifacts. You know, we are super artifact dependent. And as you go back in time, that ceases to be the case. We've been users and makers of artifacts for quite a long time, but we've only been dependent fairly recently. And that of course, is what underlies Vincent's choice of the human planet as his title. Meaning that we are so dominant on this planet. It is the human planet in the sense that we have the power to damage it, if not destroy it. Well, probably not destroy it, but we can certainly make it unlivable. So it's, if you like, another way of thinking about the sequence of events that archaeologists are trying to reconstruct is we're going from pretty harmless creatures who were not making very much and didn't have the capacity to impact very much to today. This is really interesting as well, this artifact. It's a ceramic object. I think from South America, but could be Mesoamerica, I'm not sure. But you see, it's a container that is being turned into a person. Here are the eyes and the head. There are the armpits. So it's got quite a symbolic component. Another dimension that occurs over the last 2 million years is the kind of transition from the purely functional to the substantially symbolic. I'm just looking around to see earrings and necklaces and brooches and so on. Those are not strictly functional artifacts, are they? So you've got earrings. So you're telling us who you are with that. And so are most of us. So am I. So artifacts are really interesting. They start out, we think, being pretty functional. You've got to bash your way into a bone to get at the marrow of the skin there. So you make a stone artifact to do that. But eventually you start making artifacts that are more than just functional. They meet the functional needs, but you now make it so that everybody knows, well, that's John's artifact. I can see some elements in that that's not strictly functional. He didn't have to make it. He didn't have to take that many flakes off to make the artifact, but he did. Whereas Jack over there, he doesn't bother. He just whacks a few off till it's sharp enough, and then off he goes. Well, there may be some other purpose in that. Jack, it's not that Jack's less careful or whatever. It's just that it's important that when he puts his artifact down and he goes somewhere else and he comes back a few months later, the artifact's still there because we know it's his. So, as I say, Vincent starts by saying a few things about what archaeology is, trying to distinguish archaeology from things that are very similar to archaeology, and some people might even include it in it. So, we're not paleontologists, right? We as you may have already experienced it, but certainly many people say to me, archaeology, oh yeah, dinosaurs. No. Dinosaurs sort of went extinct, where it was about 1 million years ago. There were no people, there were barely any mammals. So that's not archaeology. Archaeologists are interested in people and their artifacts and their history. Of course, eventually, as we follow this, as we track this back, we're going to get back some of those chaps at the left-hand end of that diagram that was there on the bottom of the last hand, where we're going to say, well, this is not a people anymore. This is not a person, this is not a human being, whatever definition we're going to use. These are ancestors of people. Right? So the boundary between archaeology and paleontology is going to be a bit blurred. We're very clearly interested in the recent end of that trajectory, particularly once people start making artifacts. But as we get back, many archaeologists, some archaeologists in our department here, all over South Africa and all over Africa, are interested in very early ancestors who are not making artifacts. They might have been using things, they might have been picking up useful bits of stone and bashing into that bone to get at the marrow, or cutting it, or to cut up the animal, or whatever it is. But they weren't making those things, but they were smart enough to realize what was worth using and that's it. So we're going to grade back into paleontology. And of course, paleontologists can, even when people started making artifacts, and you've got very clear archaeology with an archaeological record, there is still a paleontological record. So paleontologists are working on sites that are as old, or as young, as archaeologists. But we're not really primarily interested in animals. We're interested in animals insofar as they impact what people are doing. Just to confuse you though, I'm not trying to, but sorry Zav, look at Xavier. He's in the archaeology department, but he's interested in animals, actually. But that's simply because archaeology is interested in everything. So at some point, our interests overlap with people who are primarily interested in elephants or in hares. Mm-hmm. That is, right? Because people are eating hares. They may not be eating elephants, but they're painting elephants, whatever. That's what I mean when I say archaeology is very broad, and even though we might be offering definitions, I think you'd be quite wise to think of every single boundary that I'm pointing out as a little bit blurred, or sometimes quite massively blurred, actually. We're not geologists either. Geology is extremely important to us. You'll hear about stratigraphy. We share an interest in stratigraphy with geologists. We have to know what those thermal artifacts are made from, because that might tell us where they came from, and that might tell us something about human movements around the landscape. But we're not geologists. This boundary is a bit blurred. We are not Indiana Jones or Lara Croft, right? No, I mean Vincent is making the point here that those things you see in films, they're caricatures. But there's not. It's not that there aren't elements of archaeology about what these people are doing. Not at all. There is, but some of the characteristics of archaeology have been exaggerated, and some have been completely eliminated. And so this is certainly, you could say Indiana Jones is not a full and fair representation of what archaeologists do. I've got a hat that's a bit like that, but in my view, I wear it to keep the sun off and whatever. Whereas there are other elements in why that hat is there. And as I remember, but I don't see it here, he had a whip. At some stage. I've never had a whip. And I'm not sure archaeologically what you do with it, but anyway, and it's not that the artifacts that we're looking for, in many sense, are very, very mundane. They are very ordinary. There are millions of them, and we get very excited when we find some of them. I'm not trying to say there's no excitement in archaeology. There certainly is. There might even be quite a lot of fame in archaeology. But primarily, our objective is to find evidence and to use it to talk about what people are doing, and usually not what individual people are doing, but what the general course of prehistory is. And I don't know about this. I mean, I've never been tied up, as far as I know, with in a course of what I do. Well, however, I'm just trying to say that there are some elements. They are looking at the past. They are looking for artifacts. They are trying to reconstruct things, but it just doesn't ring too many bells. Guns. So, I don't know what's happened there. So, archaeology is, these are Vincent's words, so you can understand that scientific is very prominent in his definition. It's the scientific study of past human societies through their material culture. Right? If things don't leave any trace at all, then we're going to battle to get over it or understand it. We sometimes can get a sense that something that we can't find is there, but we obviously can't collect it. So most of what we get will be material. It will be culture in the sense that an anthropologist uses the word culture. In other words, it will be an object that has been made as a result of learned behavior. Right? In other words, people learn to make artifacts in particular ways, and they learn to make better artifacts from their experience. And so it is cultural. It's not biological. Right? That doesn't mean that we're not interested in the biological. We are. You see that. But primarily, human history is the development and evolution of artifacts made by people who learned to make them from their parents or from teachers. So, material culture, meaning part of the non-biological stuff that people are using to get on in the world, which is material. Archeo being mentioned, yes, logos being science. You see, and I slightly differ from Vincent on that last sentence. Material culture separates archaeologists from anthropologists. No, it doesn't actually. Sorry. Anthropologists are also interested in material culture, but not as a primary source of evidence, as we are. So I would rephrase that. And obviously it's true, anthropologists are interested in ideas, worldview, and beliefs, but so are we. It's just that you can't dig up a belief or a name. But ideas, worldview, and beliefs are behind those artifacts. You know, they're embedded in them in some way if we can manage to get at it. Material culture makes us humans make material culture. Chimps make material culture, but that doesn't make them human. So there's another of those boundaries. You can understand the boundary, but it's not strict. Birds build nests. Are they beavers? Otters take artifacts and they break open shells by bashing the shells on their chest. There's a lot of some ravens, or crows. Anyway, quite a lot of animals make artifacts. As I said earlier, it's a much more marginal pursuit in their case. And the sum of all this stuff is the material record, the archaeological record. So we talk about it as a record. So people are not writing down what they're doing, but they are recording what they're doing by doing things in particular ways. And if we're lucky, putting that stuff in a place where it will survive. A lot of it doesn't survive and doesn't become part of the material record or the archaeological. And the archaeological record, because it goes back in time, it does get kind of caught up in the geological record or in the record of past times. And so I've got some very nice examples of that. So here archaeologists doing various things, and just to show you the variety. So this is somebody in a laboratory. If you're analysing a piece of the archaeological record as a chemist, you can't do it in an archaeological way. You've got to do it like the chemists do it. It's got to be proper chemistry, right? If you're looking at isotopes in a piece of bone, you've got to do it in exactly the same way as an isotope chemist does it. There's not another kind of isotope or another kind of geology, or even another kind of architect, or another kind of anything, just because it happens to be part of what the archaeologists do. There's a huge amount of geomatics in archaeology. Some of my best friends here at UCD are geomatics and have been for 50 years. Why? Because I've needed maps of places where I've been. And even when there were surveyors, anybody here a surveyor? But nobody's a surveyor anymore. They're geometricians and whatever. And they don't use a theodolite anymore. It's a total station. Nothing modest about that thing. But we need to know where our stuff is. And we need to know it just as accurately. Well, not quite as accurately. I'll tell you a story about that. Not quite as accurately, but we need to do it properly. We need to make our maps properly. We need to survey properly. My good friend who's retired, from geomatics, Heinz Schrute. Heinz came with us to Bungadlow, which is the site in KwaZulu-Natal. It was the place where Dingaan lived, and we were making a map of the site. And it's very big. You know, it's about 2 kilometers across. So, 1,500, 2,000 dome V-shaped structures placed in a circle. And it's gone now, but we wanted to try and find out where it was, where it had been, so that we could excavate it. So I said, okay, I'll make a map. So it starts out, because it didn't have total state, this is 1970. Yeah, whatever they had there, And off he goes, and he comes back all the way around this huge site, and he looks at his numbers and his figures, and he says, no, we'll have to do that again. We're this far out. And I said to him, wouldn't have made any difference if you were that far out. For an archaeologist, close enough. No, don't do it again. So he did it again. And produced a wonderful map. I think what's happening here is I said we're not an experimental science, we're not an experiment in the strict sense of the word. But if we want to know at what temperature will pots fire, we can do some experiments in the present. We can make some pots, we can put them in the fire. These days I've got these fancy, what are they called, where you stick it in the fire to tell you what the temperature is. Somebody here will know because we come from all over the university. And we can do an experiment and we can find out that if we heat it to such and such a temperature, that's how the clay gets transformed. If we do it twice the temperature, it's something different. We have to know that kind of thing because when we analyze the archaeological pieces, we want to say something about what temperatures could those people achieve, or how long did they leave in the fire, or was the fire closed or open, those kind of. So I think that's what's happening there. Some archaeologists doing an experiment to try and learn something in the present, from the present, by doing experiments which will be valuable for looking at archaeology. And I think that's what's going on up there as well. So you want to know, you found some interesting apparent slice marks on the bones that you're looking at, and you want to know, was this coming from a stone tool? Was Was somebody dismembering this hair? Or were they slicing the meat off the hair to eat? And so you can do experiments. We can do experiments, and I love that. So I think what Vincent is trying to demonstrate here is all of this varied stuff can be what archaeologists do. So can this. I'm not sure if this is our laboratory upstairs. You know,
no, that's not ours.
If you went into that archaeometry laboratory up there, it would be no different from chemistry labs anywhere in the world. They do a lot of isotope work. So your archaeologist may be spending his or her time in there. Increasingly, genetics, fundamental in archaeological reconstruction. And so a lot of the human evolution reconstructions are coming from geneticists or archaeologists working with geneticists. It started out, archaeologists kind of providing interesting problems to geneticists or to geomaticians or to geophysicists. You know, and in a lot of those disciplines, individuals found it interesting to be approached by an archaeologist and say, well, here's our problem. We can't solve it, but we think you've got the technology or you've got the knowledge or whatever. Won't you have a go at it? And very significant collaborations happen there. Anthropogeny then, the origins of people, where did we come from, how did we get there? Thank you. Anthropology, the study of people in the present. There are different kinds of anthropologists, of course. There are physical anthropologists, biological anthropologists, social anthropologists, cultural anthropologists. I'm not sure how we could go on and on. You'll obviously have to wrestle a bit with all these ologies and operas and whatever. But I'm not going to do that here. And you can decide to what extent you need them. But there's an anthropologist, and anthropologists are mostly dealing with people they can talk to, people who are not dead. Our people are dead. And pointless talking to them. However, we're very interested in what they discover in ways that you'll probably feel. They are ethno-archaeology. Experiments. You want to know what happened. You're looking at an archaeological situation, and you're pretty sure the people are hunter-gatherers because the animals are all animals that you hunt. There are no domestic animals there. And the plants are all plants that you gather. They're not domesticated plants. So you want to know. You want some help reconstructing what your hunter-gatherers are doing. What's the best thing to do? I like to say this. Harry Potter. You can read Harry Potter. Go ahead. Not going to help you very much. Shakespeare's sonnets, yes, lovely. But what about reading what the anthropologists say about hunter-gatherers who are still surviving? Surely that's best. Or a better thing. You want to, if you're confident that you're reconstructing the behavior of hunter-gatherers, the best thing you can fill your head with is information about what hunter-gatherers do under any kind of circumstance. Quaternary. I'll leave that a bit because prehistory. There you go. Vincent says, regarded by some historians, yes, as a complex term. Vincent still thinks it's useful. I actually still think it's useful, but I understand the point that terms which are valuable to professionals might turn out not to be attractive to the societies and the communities to whom they're being applied, and you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to listen to that, whatever. Why is it important? With Machu Picchu and a tourist there, the past is of great interest to people. Partly in its own terms, partly as a possible profession that some of you may be thinking of. Partly because it's. Did anybody see that Netflix thing on?
Graham Hancock.
Yeah. Oh, was it Graham Hancock?
Yeah.
No, I think there was a Graham Hancock, but there was also Lee Berger.
Oh, Homo Naledi.
The burials of Homo Naledi in this cavern system in the Transvaal. I might say more about that, but it can have great newsworthy status. Tourism, yeah, a lot of money in archaeology. I mean, in museums and in World Heritage Sites. We're just having, I'll talk about the site again. We're just having one of our caves that we've been excavating declared a World Heritage Site. It's a hell of a business, and it might not really do anybody any good, but it's part of a global move towards trying to attract global tourists to visit proclaimed World Heritage Sites around the world. Identity, you've probably read also, was Cleopatra black, or was she green, or both, whatever. You might not think it's something great interesting. It does have purchase. Many countries are named after archaeological sites. Mali, named after an empire in West Africa about 1,000 years ago. Zimbabwe is named after these stone sites that are very prominent in Zimbabwe. I'm not quite sure what that is. The past can be a kind of a rallying call. I think that's what Vincent's meaning. Or it can be used in nation building. But Vincent is prepared to say that there's much more than all of this. And that is, there's the question of where did we come from? How did we get here? Or you might ask, who are we? Who's the we there? Vincent's goal is to... I don't think that's very good. Anyway, those are Vincent's stated goals, right? That it's a radical understanding of the past, it's relevant to today, and perhaps this is, it's inter or transdisciplinary. It involves a lot of different people. You can read this. This is what you're supposed to get out of it, right? And this is the kind of functional stuff that you need to know. When the tests are, when the quizzes are, when you have to write an essay, all this is done through Amatuba, and you can get all these lectures there. So if you don't want to hear what I have to say about it, you don't really strictly need to.
Will we have a quiz in the first week?
No. I think, I don't know whether it's because I'm here or not, but for some reason the first 2 weeks you're exempt from any of that, or they're not scheduled. Okay, and the other thing I should say, you must ask me questions because I'll just tell you things. And I have no idea whether they are what you'd like to hear or no, or whether there's something else that you'd rather hear me talk about. So please ask. And I'm sure Vincent feels the same way. Thank you. Oh, there are the textbooks. This is all.